Welcome to our channel. Today, we bring you an intriguing story that begins in a secluded farmhouse, deep within the heart of a dense forest. This was the home of Evelyn Crane, who had chosen this isolated sanctuary to escape the terrors that once haunted her life. The farmhouse, with its weathered boards and sagging roof, stood in stark contrast to the greenery that surrounded it. For years, Evelyn had lived here in self-imposed exile, hoping to leave behind her encounters with the supernatural. Yet, as she touched the doorknob, a familiar prickling sensation at the back of her neck reminded her that she was never truly alone. Upon stepping inside, the musty scent of aged wood and the eerie silence enveloped her, bringing back a flood of memories. The house was a physical weight on her senses, a reminder of her past battles with dark forces. She had vowed never to engage with the supernatural again, but destiny had other plans. Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a frantic pounding at the door. With a weary sigh, Evelyn moved towards the entrance, bracing herself for what awaited. As she opened the door, she was met by a haggard-looking couple, their faces etched with desperation. "Please, you have to help us," the woman said, her voice quivering. "It's our daughter, Lily. She's possessed." Evelyn felt the familiar knot of dread form in the pit of her stomach. Possessed. The word hung in the air, laden with a weight that threatened to crush her resolve. She had sworn never again to confront such malevolent forces, not after what had happened during her last exorcism. The memories of that fateful night still haunted her, a scar that would never fully heal. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," Evelyn said, her voice hollow. "I'm done with that. With all of it." The man stepped forward, his eyes pleading. "You don't understand. Lily is only 12 years old. We've tried everything, but the thing inside her, it's..." He shook his head, his words trailing off into a desperate sob. Evelyn felt her heart clench with a mix of pity and trepidation. The thought of a child being tormented by a demonic force was enough to shake even her hardened resolve. She had seen the devastation such entities could inflict, the way they could shatter a person's very soul. But she had also witnessed the cost of confronting them. The price she had paid still lingered, a wound that refused to heal. "Please," the woman begged, her eyes brimming with tears. "You're our last hope." Evelyn's gaze drifted past the couple, towards the eerie silence of the forest beyond. She could feel its oppressive presence, a subtle but undeniable force that seemed to emanate from the very earth. Shadowvale. The name alone was enough to stir a sense of unease within her. It was a place she had hoped to leave behind forever, a town shrouded in darkness and the lingering remnants of an ancient evil. And now, it seemed, that darkness had once again found its way to her doorstep. Evelyn's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, inexplicable shift in the air, a palpable chill that seemed to seep into her very bones. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the tree-line, a faint stirring of unease creeping up her spine. "Wait," she said, her voice low and cautious. "What exactly is happening in Shadowvale?" The couple exchanged a weighted glance, their faces etched with a mix of fear and reluctance. It's been happening for a while now," the man explained, his brow furrowed with worry. "People have been disappearing, vanishing without a trace. And Lily..." He swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the floorboards. "Lily started acting strange, saying things, doing things that aren't her." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. Disappearances. Possession. The telltale signs of a supernatural presence, one that had clearly taken root in the desolate town. Despite her better judgment, a sense of duty began to stir within her. She had dedicated her life to protecting the innocent from the dark forces that lurked in the shadows. Could she truly turn her back on that now, especially when a child's life hung in the balance? Closing her eyes, Evelyn took a deep, steadying breath. The scars of her past still ached, a constant reminder of the price she had paid. But the pleading look in the couple's eyes, the desperation etched into their features, was enough to shatter her resolve. "I'll do what I can," she said, her voice brimming with a reluctance that belied the determined set of her jaw. The couple's faces flooded with relief, their shoulders sagging as the tension drained from their bodies. "Thank you," the woman breathed, her words barely above a whisper. "Thank you so much." Evelyn nodded, already turning to gather the tools and talismans she would need. As she moved, a sense of dread crept up her spine, a whisper of foreboding that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the farmhouse. She knew what awaited her in Shadowvale. The darkness that had once consumed her was still out there, waiting, and the thought of confronting it once more filled her with a bone-deep trepidation. But the memory of a child's terrified face, the desperate plea for help, was enough to steel her resolve. With a deep breath, Evelyn stepped out into the shadowy forest, the weight of her burden dragging her down like a physical force. The journey ahead would be arduous, fraught with peril, but she had no choice. For Lily's sake, and for the sake of the innocent lives that had been claimed by the town's dark history, she had to face her fears and confront the evil that lurked within Shadowvale. The road to redemption, it seemed, would be paved with the shards of her own shattered past. Evelyn stepped into the oppressive gloom of Shadowvale, immediately sensing the palpable supernatural presence that clung to the town like a thick mist. The dense forest that hemmed in the boundaries seemed to close in around her, and an uneasy silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional creak of weathered buildings. As she navigated the deserted streets, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her gaze darted from abandoned storefronts to the shadowed alleyways, searching for any sign of movement. The town had a haunted, lifeless quality that sent a shiver down her spine, reminding her all too vividly of the ghosts that had once tormented her. Evelyn's destination was the local sheriff's office, where she had agreed to meet with the skeptical Tom Walters. She needed his help to investigate the recent disappearances that had been plaguing Shadowvale, disappearances that she now believed were connected to the Harper family's plight and the entity that had taken hold of young Lily. The sheriff's office was a modest, worn-down structure, its faded sign creaking in the light breeze. Evelyn took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation, before pushing open the door and stepping inside. Walters looked up from his desk, his brow furrowing as Evelyn approached. "I must admit, I didn't expect you to actually show up. Most folks in this town would rather ignore our dark little secrets than poke around in them." "I don't have the luxury of ignoring the darkness, Sheriff," Evelyn replied, her voice low and measured. "This entity, or whatever it is, has already claimed one innocent victim. I won't stand by and let it take another." Walters leaned back in his chair, appraising her with a skeptical eye. "So you really believe Lily Harper is possessed, huh? You'll have to forgive me if I have a hard time swallowing that particular pill. I understand your skepticism," Evelyn said, "but I've seen the effects of demonic possession firsthand. What's happening to Lily is no ordinary mental illness or delusion." She paused, her gaze hardening. "And if you want to get to the bottom of these disappearances, you're going to have to trust me, or at least work with me, whether you believe in the supernatural or not." Walters let out a long sigh, running a hand through his graying hair. "All right, fine. But you'd better have some damn good evidence to back up these claims of yours. I'm not about to go chasing ghosts on a whim." "Fair enough," Evelyn conceded. "Now, what can you tell me about the recent disappearances? Where have the victims been vanishing from?" The sheriff leaned forward, his expression grim. "All over town, really, from their homes, off the streets, even right out of their cars. No bodies, no witnesses, no leads. It's like they just vanished into thin air." Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. "And how long has this been going on?" "Couple of months, at least," Walters answered. "Folks are starting to get real antsy. Some are even talking about leaving town altogether, if they can." "I see." Evelyn paused, her gaze drifting towards the map of Shadowvale pinned to the wall. "Is there a pattern to the disappearances? Any commonalities between the victims?" Walters shook his head. "Not that I can tell. They're seemingly random, men, women, young, old. The only thing they have in common is that they all vanished without a trace." Evelyn's brow furrowed as she studied the map, her fingers tracing the streets and landmarks. "What about the Harper family? Do they have any connection to the other victims?" The sheriff let out a heavy sigh. That's where things get complicated. The Harpers aren't exactly the most upstanding citizens in Shadowvale. There have been rumors for years about their involvement in some shady occult practices. Evelyn's gaze snapped back to Walter's, her expression hardening. Occult practices? What exactly are you implying? Walters held up his hands in a placating gesture. Hey, I'm just telling you what I've heard. Nothing's ever been proven, but there are plenty of folks around here who believe the Harpers made some kind of deal with the devil, so to speak. Evelyn felt her heart pounding in her chest. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but she needed more information, and she needed to see Lily Harper again, to better understand the nature of the entity that had taken hold of her. I need to speak with the Harpers, Evelyn said, her tone brooking no argument. And I need to see Lily. Immediately. Walters hesitated, his brow furrowed in thought. I suppose that could be arranged. But you'd better tread carefully, Miss Crane. The Harpers are a proud, private bunch, and they don't take kindly to outsiders poking around in their business. Evelyn nodded, her expression grim. I understand the risks. But I have to at least try to save that poor girl, and to uncover the truth behind these disappearances. Whatever it takes. With a resigned sigh, Walters reached for the phone on his desk. All right then. I'll make the arrangements. As he began dialing, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her veins. She was here, in the heart of the darkness, and she would not rest until she had confronted the entity that had taken hold of Shadowvale, and her own demons as well. Evelyn gazed out the window of the sheriff's cruiser as it rumbled down the winding road leading into the heart of Shadowvale. The overcast sky seemed to press down oppressively, casting the town in a shroud of gloom. She shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat, her mind still reeling from the disturbing encounter with the possessed Lily Harper. Sheriff Tom Walters cleared his throat, breaking the uneasy silence. So, you really believe this is all the work of some supernatural entity? Evelyn turned to face him, her expression grim. I've seen things you couldn't even begin to imagine, Sheriff. The darkness that has taken hold of this town is unlike anything I've encountered before. Walters frowned, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. I'll admit, the evidence is compelling. But you're asking me to believe in ghosts and demons. That's a pretty big leap, even for me. I understand your skepticism, Evelyn replied, her voice measured. But you have to trust that I know what I'm dealing with here. This town is in grave danger, and time is running out. The sheriff sighed heavily. All right, I'll play along for now. Where do you suggest we start? The Harper house was just the beginning, Evelyn said, her gaze fixed on the decaying buildings that lined the streets. I need to find out more about this town's history. There has to be a connection between Lily's possession and the other disappearances. Walters nodded, pulling the car to a stop in front of a dilapidated library. This is the only place in town that might have some answers. Be my guest. Evelyn stepped out of the car, pausing to take in her surroundings. The air here felt thick and oppressive, as if the very walls of the buildings were saturated with an unseen malevolence. She shivered, steeling herself before entering the library. The interior was musty and dimly lit, rows of dusty shelves lining the walls. Evelyn made her way to the front desk, where a bored-looking librarian eyed her with barely concealed suspicion. I'm looking for information on the history of Shadowvale, Evelyn said, her voice low. Particularly anything related to disappearances or occult activities. The librarian regarded her warily. I'm not sure I should be sharing that kind of information. This town has had its fair share of troubles over the years, and the locals don't take kindly to outsiders poking around. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. People's lives are at stake. I need to know what I'm up against. The librarian hesitated, then sighed, gesturing towards a set of shelves in the back. There's an old archive in the basement. You might find what you're looking for down there, but I can't guarantee it'll be pretty. Evelyn nodded her thanks and made her way to the basement, the floorboards creaking ominously beneath her feet. The archive was a maze of musty boxes and tattered documents, and she began sifting through them, her fingers tracing the faded ink. As she delved deeper into the records, a horrifying picture began to emerge. Shadowvale's history was steeped in the occult, with numerous reports of unexplained disappearances and strange, ritualistic activities. The town's founders, it seemed, had made a pact with a malevolent entity, one that now threatened to consume them all. Evelyn's blood ran cold as she stumbled upon references to an ancient cult that had worshipped the entity, performing dark rituals in the abandoned mine on the outskirts of town. The cult's actions had seemingly kept the entity at bay for decades, but now, it appeared that the balance had been irreparably disrupted. She emerged from the basement, her mind racing. Sheriff Walters was waiting for her, a concerned expression on his face. "Find anything?" he asked. Evelyn nodded, her voice grave. "The town's history is far more twisted than I ever could have imagined. It seems the Harper family has ties to an ancient cult that made a pact with the entity possessing Lily." Walter's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. Are you telling me the Harpers are involved in all this?" "I'm afraid so," Evelyn said, her brow furrowed. "And if my suspicions are correct, they may hold the key to stopping this thing before it's too late." Walters ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "This is a lot to take in. I'm not sure I'm ready to believe that the Harpers are in league with some kind of supernatural force." Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, her gaze unwavering. "I need you to trust me, Sheriff. The lives of everyone in this town depend on it." Walters hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, where do we go from here?" "We need to confront the Harpers," Evelyn said, her jaw set with determination. "They have answers, and we're running out of time to get them." The two of them made their way to the Harper residence, the air thick with tension. Evelyn steeled herself, her heart pounding, as Walters knocked on the door. When it opened, revealing a haggard-looking Sarah Harper, Evelyn knew they were on the verge of uncovering the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. As the chapter ends, the reader is left with a growing sense of unease and the looming threat of the entity's presence. Evelyn and Walter's confrontation with the Harpers promises to reveal more of the town's dark history and the family's involvement in the occult, setting the stage for an even more intense and perilous confrontation to come. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she stared at the worn pages of the ancient tome, the dim light of the library casting unsettling shadows across the text. The revelations contained within the crumbling tome had shaken her to the core, evidence that the founders of Shadowvale had made a pact with an entity far beyond human comprehension, a malevolent force that now threatened to consume the town and the Harper family. With a deep, steadying breath, she closed the book and turned to face Michael and Sarah Harper, who sat anxiously across the table, their faces etched with desperation and fear. "Your family," Evelyn began, her voice strained. "They were part of a cult that summoned this thing. This entity that now possesses your daughter." Michael Harper shook his head, his eyes pleading. "We didn't know, Evelyn. We were young, impressionable. The cult promised power, riches, a way to save our dying town. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into." Sarah's fingers clutched at the table, her knuckles white. "Please, you have to understand. We just want to save our little girl. We'll do anything." Evelyn studied their faces, searching for any hint of deception. After a moment, she sighed deeply. "I believe you. But that doesn't change the fact that your family's past actions have put Lily in grave danger." She stood, pacing the cramped library, her mind racing. "This entity, it's ancient, powerful. And it's taken a particular interest in your daughter. I have to know everything you can tell me about the pact, the cult, and what they did to summon this thing." The Harpers exchanged a weighted glance, then Sarah spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was called the Order of the Shrouded Blade. They believed this entity could grant them the power to save Shadowvale, to make it thrive again. But the price..." She shuddered. "The price was more than any of us could have imagined." Michael leaned forward, his eyes haunted. "They performed a ritual, a summoning, in the abandoned mine on the edge of town. The entity. It manifested, and in exchange for its power, the cult leaders offered it their firstborn children. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. Lily. Yes, Michael said, his face crumpling with grief. The entity has come to claim its due, and we don't know how to stop it. The weight of the Harper's revelation hung in the air, a palpable sense of dread filling the room. Evelyn's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this twisted history, to find a way to break the curse that had been placed upon this doomed town. I need to see this mine, she said, her voice laced with determination. And I need to understand the nature of the ritual they performed. There may be a way to sever the entity's hold on Lily, but I have to act quickly. Sheriff Walters, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. I'll accompany you. As much as I hate to admit it, this is clearly beyond my jurisdiction as a mere mortal law enforcement officer. His expression was grim, but there was a glimmer of resolve in his eyes. Evelyn nodded, grateful for the support, however reluctant. Then let's go. We don't have a moment to lose. The trio made their way to the old, abandoned mine, the air thick with the scent of decay and the weight of the town's history. Evelyn could feel the entity's presence, a malevolent force that seemed to seep into the very fabric of the place. As they descended into the shadowy depths, her heart pounded, memories of her past failures threatening to overwhelm her. But the thought of Lily, innocent and vulnerable, kept her moving forward. She would not fail this child, not again. At the heart of the mine, they found evidence of the cult's twisted ritual symbols etched into the walls, the remnants of burned candles, and a strange, pulsing energy that set Evelyn's teeth on edge. This is where they did it, Michael said, his voice hollow. This is where they summoned the entity and made their pact. Evelyn ran her fingers over the symbols, her brow furrowed in concentration. The ritual was designed to bind the entity to the bloodline of the town's founders. To keep it anchored here, feeding off the energy of the firstborn children. She turned to the Harpers, her expression grim. Lily is merely the latest in a long line of sacrifices. Sheriff Walters let out a curse, his face twisted with disgust. Those sick bastards. And this thing, it's been terrorizing the town all this time? Evelyn nodded, her eyes hardening. Yes. And if we don't stop it, it will continue to claim its due, generation after generation, until Shadowvale is nothing more than a hollow shell. She turned to the Harpers, her voice soft but unyielding. Tell me everything you know about the ritual. We need to find a way to break the entity's hold, to sever its connection to your family. As the Harpers shared the fragmented details they recalled, Evelyn's mind raced, assembling a plan that could potentially save Lily and the town. But she knew it would come at a great personal cost, one that she might not be willing to pay. The weight of her own past failures pressed down upon her, and she steeled herself for the confrontation to come. This time, she would not falter. This time, she would do whatever it took to vanquish the darkness that had consumed Shadowvale. With a renewed sense of purpose, Evelyn led the group back out of the mine, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The final showdown was coming, and she could no longer afford to run from her destiny. Evelyn stood at the entrance to the abandoned Shadowvale mine, the dark maw of the tunnel stretching out before her like the gaping jaws of some ancient, malevolent beast. Beside her, Sheriff Walters and the Harpers, Michael, Sarah, and a fragile-looking Lily, waited with a mixture of trepidation and grim determination. Are you sure about this? Walters asked, his voice heavy with reluctance. Going down there could be suicide. Evelyn's gaze was steady, her face a mask of resolute purpose. I don't have a choice. The entity is there, I can feel it. If we're going to stop this, we have to confront it. She turned to the Harpers, her expression softening slightly. Are you ready? Michael and Sarah exchanged a wordless look, their hands intertwined. After a moment, Michael nodded. For Lily, we'll do whatever it takes. Lily reached out and squeezed her mother's hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else, a quiet strength that belied her young age. I'm ready, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn gave a solemn nod, then stepped into the inky blackness of the mine, the others following close behind. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the sounds of their footsteps echoed eerily in the claustrophobic confines of the tunnel. As they descended deeper underground, the shadows seemed to close in around them, pressing in from all sides. Evelyn kept one hand on the rough-hewn wall, her senses heightened, alert for any sign of the entity's presence. Suddenly, a chill crept up her spine, and she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. "Something's wrong," she murmured, her grip tightening on the flashlight. No sooner had the words left her lips than the air seemed to shift, the shadows coalescing into amorphous shapes that drifted towards them. Walters let out a startled oath, his hand going to his sidearm, but Evelyn raised a hand to stop him. "Don't fire," she warned. "These are just the entity's manifestations. Attacking them head-on will only make it angrier." The shadowy forms swirled and danced around them, their movements unsettling and unnatural. Evelyn could feel their malevolent presence, a palpable weight that bore down on her senses. She quickened her pace, the others trailing behind her, hearts pounding. As they rounded a sharp turn in the tunnel, a sight awaited them that chilled them to the bone. Carved into the rock walls were ancient symbols and glyphs, their meanings obscured by the passage of time. In the center of the chamber, a massive, gaping pit yawned open, its depths veiled in darkness. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the ritual site. "This is where they did it," she whispered, the memories of her own traumatic exorcism flooding back. "This is where the entity was summoned." The Harpers stared at the ominous pit with a mixture of horror and fascination. "You mean?" Sarah's voice trailed off, the implication clear. Evelyn nodded grimly. "Yes. This is where the town's founders made their pact with the entity, the very same one that now possesses your daughter." A low, rumbling sound reverberated through the chamber, causing the ground to tremble beneath their feet. Evelyn whirled around, shining her light into the shadows, searching for the source of the disturbance. Suddenly, a massive form materialized from the darkness, its amorphous shape shifting and contorting as it advanced towards them. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, the memories of her past failure threatening to overwhelm her. "It's here," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The entity." Walters raised his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger, but Evelyn caught his arm, her grip iron-hard. "No! Conventional weapons won't stop it. We have to use a different approach." The sheriff hesitated, his brow furrowed with uncertainty, but he lowered the gun, his expression grim. Evelyn turned to the Harpers, her gaze settling on Lily. "Lily, I need you to focus. Can you feel the entity's presence?" she asked, her voice gentle but urgent. Lily nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "Yes, I can. It's so strong, like a weight on my mind. I can barely think straight." Evelyn reached out and placed a hand on the girl's shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "I know it's terrifying, but I need you to concentrate. Channel that energy, use it to help me fight the entity." Lily's expression was one of pure determination as she closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. Evelyn turned to the Harpers, her gaze unwavering. "Michael, Sarah, I need you to stay close to Lily. Lend her your strength, your love. It may be the only thing that can anchor her against the entity's influence." The Harpers nodded, each of them taking one of Lily's hands in their own. Evelyn could see the fear in their eyes, but also a fierce protectiveness that fueled their resolve. Turning back to the advancing entity, Evelyn took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. She had faced this darkness before, and she would not be defeated by it again. With a grim determination, she began to chant the words of an ancient ritual, her voice resonating through the chamber. As the ritual reached its climax, a blinding light erupted from the pit, casting the shadows into stark relief. Evelyn felt the entity's presence recoil, its unearthly screech echoing through the tunnel. The Harpers held Lily close, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and terror. The battle had begun, and the fate of Shadowvale hung in the balance. The air in the abandoned mine was thick with the stench of decay and the oppressive weight of the earth pressing down from all sides. Evelyn gripped her ceremonial dagger tightly as she led the Harper family and Sheriff Walters deeper into the shadowy depths, her senses on high alert for any sign of the entity's presence. The walls seemed to whisper with dark secrets, the crumbling rock face hinting at the horrors that lay buried within. Evelyn felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end, a familiar prickling sensation that told her they were being watched. "Stay close," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "The entity is near," Lily whimpered, clinging to her mother's hand as they navigated the winding tunnels. Evelyn could feel the girl's fear like a tangible thing, a trembling energy that threatened to overwhelm them all. Steeling her nerves, Evelyn pressed onward, her footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The further they descended, the more the air grew thick and stale, as if the very atmosphere itself was choking the life from the space. Suddenly, a bone-chilling howl reverberated through the mine, causing the group to freeze in their tracks. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the darkness, searching for the source of the unearthly sound. "What the hell was that?" Sheriff Walters hissed, his hand gripping the handle of his sidearm. Evelyn shook her head, her expression grim. "It's here. We're running out of time." Without warning, a shadowy tendril lashed out from the darkness, wrapping around Lily's ankle and yanking her from her mother's grasp. The girl let out a terrified scream as she was dragged deeper into the mine, vanishing into the gloom. "Lily!" Sarah Harper cried, lunging forward, but Evelyn caught her arm, holding her back. "No, it's a trap," Evelyn shouted. "We have to stick together." Michael Harper's face was twisted with anguish, but he nodded, his knuckles white as he gripped the flashlight. Walters took up a defensive position, his gun drawn and his eyes scanning the darkness. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, focusing her senses. She could feel the entity's presence, a malevolent force that seemed to seep into every crevice of the abandoned mine. Gripping her dagger tightly, she began to move forward, her footsteps slow and deliberate. The group followed Evelyn, their nerves frayed as the shadows seemed to press in around them. Suddenly, a flickering light appeared in the distance, casting an eerie glow over the tunnel. As they approached, Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Lily was suspended in the air, her body contorted unnaturally as the entity's tendrils writhed around her. The girl's eyes were hollow, her mouth open in a silent scream. "Lily!" Sarah cried, but Evelyn held her back once more. "Don't," Evelyn warned. "It wants us to come closer." The entity's presence seemed to thicken, a palpable oppression that made it difficult to breathe. Evelyn could feel its malevolent gaze upon them, studying their every move. Suddenly, the flickering light intensified, casting an unearthly glow over the chamber. Evelyn gasped as she caught a glimpse of the entity's true form, a towering, amorphous creature, its limbs twisting and writhing like the roots of an ancient tree. "What is that thing?" Walters breathed, his gun trembling in his hands. Evelyn's mind raced as she recalled the ancient rituals and dark pacts she had uncovered during her research. "It's the entity that made a deal with the town's founders. It's been feeding off the town's fear and despair for decades." The entity let out a bone-chilling laugh, its voice echoing through the chamber. "Yes, little exorcist, you understand. This town is mine, as it has been for generations. And now your precious Lily will be the next to join my flock." Evelyn's grip on the dagger tightened, her knuckles turning white. "I won't let you have her." With a roar, the entity lashed out, its tendrils striking towards the group. Evelyn reacted quickly, stepping in front of the Harpers and Walters, her dagger slicing through the darkness. The entity howled in pain, its form wavering as Evelyn's consecrated blade made contact. Emboldened, Evelyn began to chant, her voice rising in a powerful invocation. The air crackled with energy, and Evelyn could feel the entity's grip on Lily begin to weaken. The girl's body slumped, but Evelyn knew she couldn't let her guard down. Walters and the Harpers watched in awe as Evelyn confronted the ancient evil, her movements fluid and precise. Michael Harper placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We have to help her," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Walters nodded, his expression grim. "I'll cover you. Go, quickly!" As Walters laid down a barrage of suppressing fire, Michael and Sarah darted forward, reaching for their daughter. The entity lashed out, its tendrils striking towards them, but Evelyn was there, her dagger slicing through the darkness. Lily's eyes fluttered open, and she let out a weak cough. "Mom? Dad?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're here, sweetheart," Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "You're safe now." Evelyn continued her chanting, her voice rising in intensity as she poured every ounce of her will into the ritual. The entity's form began to waver and distort, its unearthly howls echoing through the chamber. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from Evelyn's dagger, bathing the entire chamber in a brilliant glow. The entity recoiled, its tendrils writhing in agony. "No!" it screamed, its voice a horrific, otherworldly shriek. "This cannot be!" Evelyn gritted her teeth, pouring every last bit of her energy into the ritual. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was almost impossible to look at. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the entity's form disintegrated, dissolving into a cloud of black ash that was swallowed by the radiant light. Silence fell over the chamber, save for the sound of Lily's ragged breathing. Evelyn stood, her body trembling with exhaustion, as the Harpers and Walters stared at her in awe. She had done it, she had banished the ancient evil from Shadowvale, but at a terrible cost. As the light faded, Evelyn's eyes met Lily's, and the girl saw a lifetime of pain and regret reflected in her savior's gaze. Evelyn had confronted her own demons to defeat the entity, and the price of that victory would haunt her for the rest of her days. The town of Shadowvale lay in ruins, its dark history finally laid bare. Evelyn knew that the entity's influence would never truly be gone, that the shadow of its presence would linger on, waiting to be awakened once more. With a heavy heart, Evelyn turned and led the Harpers and Walters out of the abandoned mine, the weight of her sacrifice heavy on her soul. The sun had finally risen on Shadowvale, but the true cost of dispelling the darkness had been higher than any of them could have imagined. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, push the bell icon, and share with your friends. See you next time for more spine-tingling tales.